extra support with classes, or even if it means that you're kind of working with your student behind the scenes, that's okay. Because students, you need to get used to self-advocating and telling your own story, because very quickly, what will happen is when you're dropped off at college, well, mom and dad aren't going to be there to ask those questions. So to start doing a little bit of that now will be incredibly liberating and empowering. So think about that. Okay, so at this point, you visited schools. Oh, and also keep in mind too, virtual. If there are opportunities for you to attend a virtual information session on student life, residential life, on a particular major, do it. How easy is that? And a lot of times, you ask questions in the chat. So for people who might feel a little bit uncomfortable about, speaking up, you've got a chat to be able to throw that in there too. So take advantage of the virtual, but not in place of the on-ground, okay? Now, when you, last thing before you leave a college campus, if they've got printed newspapers, which some schools still do that, pick up a copy. Or if you're looking at a school and you get home and they have online copies of their newspaper, look at it, because that's going to give you a little bit of a sense of the culture of the school. What are some of the hot buzz topics that are happening at that particular college or university? Super interesting. And then that might cause some follow-up questions that you might have when you go to visit a school, or as you're sending a thank you email to the admissions person that you met with, to say, hey, I was looking at your newspaper and I noticed X, Y, Z. So it increases dialogue. All right. Now, on the ride home, debrief. Okay. Hopefully during your visit, you've taken pictures. Pictures that aren't going to be like every other college or university across the country. Something that's distinctive. All right. Take notes. What did you like? What did you not like? And then when you get in the car, students and parents, hash it out. Hash it out. And take notes about that, even if you're taking notes on your phone, because that's going to be helpful while it's fresh on your mind. Okay? Now, at this point, you visited school. Keep track of the time. You visited schools, and you've hopefully come up with a list of schools that you want to apply to, okay? And it happens very quickly. So one of Heidi's helpful hints. In the spring, I know at this point, COVID is a little prickly right now. So it may have some limitations, but I think a lot of us colleges and universities with appropriate masking and so forth are very much welcoming scheduled visits. It's a good time to start visiting colleges this spring, because keep in mind, this fall, you're submitting applications. So these next couple of months are going to fly by. So this spring, you're going to start visiting schools. You're going to get a college calendar, whether it's online or whether it's the old school paper calendar. Because on that college calendar, that's going to help you be organized. This comes from a person who is not organized. So you're going to put down lists of visits that you have, when registration is for standardized tests, when to apply to different schools, when to apply for scholarships or financial aid, when you're going to be meeting with your school counselors, when different deadlines for recommendations or brag sheets or whatever, when any of those are due. This calendar will be a godsend. Also this spring, like I mentioned earlier, the resume. Clubs, jobs, sports, community service. From freshman year, continued on through your senior year. It's a work in progress. Middle school, not so much. We really, unless it's something that was just unbelievable, like you were in the Olympics as a middle schooler, keep it to your high school experience, okay? And the other thing now is start to understand some college lingo, especially when you start figuring out what schools you're going to apply to. So there's some basic lingo about deadlines. There's early decision. Who knows what early decision is? Who wants to volunteer and answer for that? Yep.
Early decision is where you kind of pick your school and major and commit to that school.
Absolutely, and so by committing to that school or by applying to that school, you're saying if I'm admitted, I'm in. But also one thing I will clarify, and thank you so much, great answer. The one thing I will say is you don't have to know your major at that point. You could be an undeclared student and still do that, but great answer, thank you. So early decision is an option that very few students should select. And my school has early decision. I say that because there are a lot of choices out there, and you need to be really, really sure that that is the school that you want to go to, okay? Because so much so that if you're applying to a college or university early decision, the student is filling out or signing an early decision agreement. Your parent, one of your parents is signing or guardian is signing an early decision agreement, and your school counselor is signing an early decision agreement, which says that if the student is admitted, they will enroll. You're not deciding that's where you're going. So it's a commitment. Early action. Who knows what early action is? Yes?
Oh, man, it's, you're getting your acceptance early, but you can still decide amongst the schools that you get accepted to.
Yep. So you apply to a school early, you find out early if you've been admitted, but guess what? You've got till May 1st of the senior year, which is your candidate reply date, the date that is pretty much universal in terms of when students need to decide where they're going to school. Okay, that's early action. Now, early decision, early action, those tend to be, and again, your school counselors can probably speak better than I can about that, but I would say probably any time from November 1st to maybe early January, because there could be early decision, early action 1, early action 2, but the point is you apply early, you find out early, but you've got till May 1st of the senior year to decide that you're going. Then there's rolling admissions. First come, first serve. You know, the applications that get in earlier and become complete are typically the first ones to find out if they've been admitted. And with an admissions deadline, a regular deadline, don't be late. And find out if they only need the application at that point, or if they have to have the application, the transcript, the recommendations, if it has to be complete, okay? So think about that, and again, for deadlines, you're writing them down on your college calendar. Now, applying to schools, how do you do it? Well, many of us have our own applications, and there are some applications out there that several schools will use as its own. One such application is the common application. It's one application that more than 800 or 900 or even more will accept as its own. Super efficient, okay? Keep in mind, common application typically comes out August 1st of the senior year. So that's super helpful. Now, an admissions committee has two objectives when we're reviewing applications. The first objective is we're trying to predict the student's academic success. Okay? The second objective is we're trying to build a community, and we do that one student at a time. And it's that community building piece that is the holistic approach. Holistic, yes, the whole student that we're looking at, but it's wiggle room. It's wiggle room when we're looking at grade point averages, when we're looking at test scores. So those are primarily the two objectives that colleges and universities have. Now, what are the pieces that we're looking at for that? Well, probably the single most important piece of information that we're using is your high school transcript. Freshman right on through classes that you're taking in your senior year. Your transcript gives us an academic roadmap of all of your challenges and how well you've done with those challenges. And really, super helpful. When we're reviewing an application and we're looking at a transcript, we first look at the school from which that student comes so that we can put into context what we're seeing on the transcript, the academic rigors, and how well have you challenged yourself to best to your level of academic proficiency, okay? We want you to challenge yourself, but we don't want you to be over your head. And we all take challenges, and some work out better than others, but it's okay to stretch a little bit for as long as you're working with your teachers and your school counselors to say, hey, does this make sense that I'm taking this grouping of courses, okay? SATs, ACTs. An interesting thing has happened over the pandemic. Another interesting thing for the love of people. And that's that many schools are going test optional. Does that mean that you don't take the SATs? Well, some of you might be thinking that that would be a really cool idea, but no, you do take the SATs. And you take them, again, twice. Spring, junior year, fall, senior year. But think about this. If a school is test optional, we're not trying to trick the students. What we're trying to do is empower you to decide when an admissions committee is trying to predict your academic success at our school, what do you think really speaks best for you? Is it your transcript, primarily? Or could we benefit by also seeing your test scores? We want to give you that opportunity to decide. Some schools may have selective programs where they require test scores, and all other programs may be test optional. Some schools may not be test optional. Some schools may have been test optional just during the pandemic and have decided to, start taking more of the SATs or ACTs into consideration. These are questions that colleges are going to be very transparent about, typically on their admissions website. And where the information isn't there, either send an email to the admissions office or to your counselor in that office that works with the applications from your school. But ask the question, and don't be afraid to ask, because that's a very commonly asked question, and I think especially now. The other thing is that sometimes when schools are test optional, I'll have students that will say, yeah, but are you going to say, okay, I didn't submit my test scores, so that probably means that I didn't do well? No, you would give us entirely too much credit for thinking about that in an applicant pool of what could be 17,000 applications. No, we really, really, if we're test optional, we want you to use your judgment. And again, if you're struggling with that, talk to your school counselors about that. Talk to the admissions people about that, okay? Letters of recommendation. Typically, colleges ask for what we need, all right? Sometimes students with the best of intention and great enthusiasm, if we're asking for 1 to 3 letters of recommendation, they're submitting 7 to 10. Well, I have to tell you, we read everything that we're sent, and frankly, after 3 letters of recommendation, they all start to sound the same. So get only what we're asking for. You're not going to get brownie points for that, okay? Typically, a school counselor, secondary school report is helpful, because that gives us all of your statistics. Very helpful. We also like to see academic recommendations. Somebody that's had you more recently in your high school experience. You may have loved your English teacher freshman year, but if you haven't had that English teacher since freshman year, I really would prefer that you not use them as a recommender, because I'm hoping that the person or the student that you were as a freshman versus now is very different and in a positive way, all right? And another one of Heidi's helpful hints, before you leave for summer break in your junior year, I want you to ask the teachers that you want to write your recommendations if they would be willing to do so before summer break comes out. Because at that point, they'll be all done with their seniors that they've been writing recommendations for. You'll be fresh on their minds, And then what will happen is in the fall, when you come back to school, you'll double back with them, you'll tell them the schools that you're applying to, and you'll give them deadlines when they need to have their recommendations done. So that's, again, something that you can do early on. Extracurricular activities, I talked about that before. Start making that list now because colleges do want to know about that. We want to know about the varied interests that you have. We want to know about your ability to be a team member, your consistency with an activity, a leadership position, or your responsibility, because some students may not have a lot of activities, but you know what, maybe they have a job, or maybe they're helping out at home, because maybe they have siblings that they're responsible to take care of, or maybe they have relatives that they're helping with their care, or hobbies. These are all things that we'd like to know about, but that you can start doing that working list now. And then we've got the essay, which is probably the best part of the application or the bane of my existence. And really, that is completely up to the student, because nothing magical is going to happen to that essay when it leaves the student's hands and it gets to mine. So if a student writes their essay, they read it over and they think, oh, wow, that's really boring. You're not done. Because if you think it's boring, you're right. It will be boring, and it will be excruciating to get through, okay? This is your opportunity. It's like you're sitting down and writing a letter to the admissions committee. Everything else you're being evaluated, and the evaluation is being sent. This is directly from you. And again, if you're talking about an applicant pool of thousands of applicants, this is a chance for you to tell your story. All right, now, I'm all preachy about this, but I have to tell you, again, that kid that mom was pestering me to get the application done, don't wait till the last minute. And of course, the night before the application was due, I was sitting down to start filling out the application and write the essay. Now, this was not a weekend. This was a school day. So you can only imagine at about midnight how really ugly things turn very fast in my house. Do not wait. So, again, before you leave junior year, and probably it will be available sometime in March, the Common Application will have their essay prompts or their essay questions. Before you leave school for your junior year, I want you to print out the essay prompts or questions for this coming year. So even though the application won't be available until August 1st, the questions will be. Because what you're going to do is you're going to participate in the Junior Challenge. That's my own little name to it. The Junior Challenge is you're going to spend one uninterrupted hour a week during the summertime dedicated to working on your college application essay. Because if you do that, you can be all done with your part of the application, including the essay, by the time you step foot back at Nauset for your senior year. And I'll tell you, you will feel like all that in a bag of chips. So store that one away. That's a very helpful piece. A few things about the essay. Pick the essay topic you like the best. We don't have favorites. 7 questions. I don't care which one you use, pick one of them. Pick the one you like the best, because if you do that, 2 things are going to happen. You're going to have lots of information to pull from, and you're going to get into it. And your enthusiasm is going to be infectious. Okay? The other thing I'm going to tell you too is don't scare the admissions committee. Sometimes when students are writing their essays, they're sitting down and typing it out, and they're in their minds and they're thinking. And sometimes the information that I'm reading is so intensely personal that I'm looking through recommendations just to make sure that I'm not the only one that knows about it. Okay? You know, sometimes students' messages get lost in the details, and you want to make your essay comfortable for a group of strangers who are trying to build a community. You want to make it comfortable for them to read. And if it's important to have somebody proofread your essay, and I might suggest maybe an English teacher, maybe a school counselor, but somebody who is going to be very, very straightforward with you. And if there is one person in your world, as you think about this essay, reading it, that you would not want to read it, you're not done. All right? You need to feel comfortable with anybody reading your essay. Okay? And the other thing I'm going to throw out there, because I forgot to mention this, and this is a really huge thing, cost. You know, I talked earlier about investment, and whether you're looking at public institutions or private institutions, it's a lot of money. And sometimes you kind of think like, whoa, I can't even conceptualize this, okay? So a couple of things that I'm gonna mention to you, it's not just one family that can't afford it, it's a country that can't afford it. And many of us colleges and universities are tuition driven, which means that every student that enrolls is important to us. And you may find that some of the highly expensive schools may have financial resources available that some of the less expensive schools don't have. So that's why it's important to go through the financial aid process and start inquiring about scholarships, honor scholarship, leadership scholarships, any kind of scholarships. But you want to incorporate those questions now into the college search, because the first time you're having this conversation with your student should not be in April of the senior year prior to the May 1st deadline. You need to be upfront and candid about this and start working in these questions as you're visiting schools. And like the academic fit, reach, target, and safety, you need to have a financial fit, reach, target, and safety. Okay? So think about those particular pieces too. And I'm not going to get a whole lot into the financial aid piece because there's plenty more time for that. But every college and university by law is required to have a net price calculator on their websites. It's a law. The benefit to this net price calculator is that they're going to ask you for information about income. You're going to plug that in, and based on what you plug in and that school's financial aid awarding policies, you can get somewhat of a sense of what that financial aid offering might look like. Okay? If there's any clarity, and again, you need to go through the process, but it might give you a ballpark look. What you won't get through that are merit-based scholarships, okay? Because need-based financial aid has to do with families' financial resources and income. Merit-based scholarship has nothing to do with that, or other kinds of scholarships like leadership scholarships. It's not tied to that. So, but I think all in all, it's great to have you all here this evening. You have officially started the process, whether you've already visited schools or not. And while this is daunting, you're going to be great because this process was designed for 16, 17, and 18-year-olds to navigate. And this will go well, I promise. Any questions?
We were told at some schools not only require, say, the Common App and the essay that it gets submitted with that, but there are numerous other essays that they expect that need to be tailored to that specific. Is that? I didn't know if somebody was blowing smoke or if
No. So if you didn't hear the question and statement that even though people may fill out the common application, there may be what's called supplemental essays, which are more institutional specific. that are not necessarily part of the common application. For some schools, that's absolutely the truth. For others, it's not. And that's where 3,000 schools, you got to check. And if you go to admissions websites, we'll be very clear about what we want you to fill out in order to apply.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes?
Do you have an idea of how many schools they should apply to? Every school has a non-refundable application fee. Is it 10, is it 7, 3? What's a good number?
Well, you know what, I'm going to defer to my school counseling folks here, because I think that they can better speak to that.
Sure, we generally say 6 to 8. We've seen students go upwards of 10. We've had students go far beyond that, and I would strongly encourage everybody to have a very long conversation with us before you do that. Because at the end of the day, you can only go to one, right? So you're going to have to make a decision eventually anyway. But if you're thoughtful in this research piece of the search process, then the right schools should be starting to filter themselves out. 6 to 8 is a good number. But again, as I mentioned earlier, a couple in that reach, the majority in that target area, and 1 or 2 in that probable area.
Yes?
You mentioned early decision and early action. If I'm following you correctly, since early decision is binding, you would only apply to one school.
Yes.
Is it the same for early action?
Good question. So typically with early decision, and because early decision might be an option, doesn't mean you should do it. I'm just throwing that out there. But if you are applying to a school early decision, it is only one of those because you have committed to that school before you're even admitted. Okay? Yep.
Can you not apply to other schools but then withdraw your application?
Yeah, good question. All right. So, yes, good point. All right. If you're applying to a college or university early decision, you're doing so, and you can still apply to other schools. Not early decision, but you can still apply to other schools. Good idea. Okay? But if a student is admitted to early decision, then they are having to withdraw all other applications from other colleges and universities and commit to that one school. Okay? And early action, this is interesting. Some schools will have early action 1, early action 2. Students could apply to multiple schools early action, but also I think our school counselors have also seen some patterns with that too. Have you ever seen any early action schools that are saying early action single decision, and what does that mean? And
Restrictive early action.
restrictive early action, so what does that mean? Good question to ask the school. So I think the big thing is, there's a lot of lingo. And so when there's a gray area, you've got to ask the school. And it will be outlined, and I promise you, it will be outlined on that admissions page. And if it's not, reach out, whether it's phone call or email, to that college or university, because they will very clearly and patiently let you know, because they want you to know. Okay? Yes?
It's just kind of a really generic question. What would you say is a good length for the college essay?
The question is, what's a good length for a college essay? Well, you know what? Colleges, the Common Application and applications themselves will tell you exactly what the good length is.
Okay.
You know, typically it's about a page to a page and a half, but applications will tell you what they want that length to be. So again, you know, even though, and sometimes, you know, when we're talking about something like the Common Application, it's easy to get on autopilot, but even though this is one application that hundreds of schools will use as its own, you still need to read the directions for that particular school because there may be supplemental essays. There may be other requirements that you need to know about with that. But again, if you read the directions, it will tell you. Any other questions? Yes?
I have a question about, a lot of people are, questioning the return on a college education. Now I come from a family of PhDs, so, clearly my family believes in the return on education. But in terms of COVID, how appropriate is it to ask in an interview, what is your plan? What is your plan linked to the finances involved in going remote, going forward? Have you seen any cases where a college returns some of the money if the college goes remote and therefore, have you seen?
We get a lot of those questions.
Right. I mean, it's a complicated question, but.
And it is a complicated question.
Yeah.
The question was kind of return on your investment as you're applying to schools. I was kind of thinking more career-wise and what it was going to bring you.
No, but in terms of the
graduation.
college experience, you're buying an experience to go away to college and live in a dorm, but some of that is not happening, and college is going remote.
And so
Even
this is,
today, now they're going remote again, the second time, third time,
right, so the question is specific to COVID. Every school is going to be different with that, and absolutely ask them. If you've got the question,
Yeah.
ask it.
I'm curious.
But-
I mean, some private schools are $80,000, $100,000, for the 4 years, or for 1 year, for 1 year. And that's
Absolutely.
a lot of money to send
And
your
some of
kids
them
to
are-
not go to not go away,
Absolutely, and some
to
of them are
be in the bedroom, to
absolutely
do it online. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
so the huge investment to be remote. And some of those schools also might be giving the student a full ride to be remote too.
Right.
But your question is a great one, a very good one. And I would ask, we get those
Yeah.
questions all the time, and I have to tell you, sometimes it's a moving target. And it is, I can remember in the fall of 2020, students get on campus, and again, everybody's kind of feeling their way, and COVID was kind of like, honey, it's moving and morphing, but you don't always see the direction it's going in, but you've been traumatized by what you've already been through, without a doubt. And some people were saying, it's fall 2020, what are you going to do for fall 2021? Well, if we only knew where we were going to be with COVID at that time, but I think ask the question.
Yeah.
Ask the question of the colleges and universities, what if? And they may say, good question, I don't know. They may, and even more so, I think I would ask about, do you ever foresee going into, because we've been in a pandemic, what kinds of safeguards have you made should this rear its ugly head again? Is the idea to go remote? If they decide to go remote, is there any refunds of money or credit for the next semester? These are great questions to ask.
Yeah.
And some of it may be, I'm not sure yet.
Yeah.
And that's the frustrating part. But does that mean that you shouldn't ask the questions? Absolutely. You should
It's
ask
hard
the
to make that investment when you don't know.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and we might have some folks that will say, you know what? I want to know right now, and I don't, so I think my student is going to take time staying closer to home and being a commuter. And perhaps they're able to do it at a school that's not as expensive, and then maybe transfer in. There's no right answer to that, but it's going to be whatever answer you and your family needs to feel comfortable with.
No, thank you.
But it is. It's, you know what? It's hard. It's hard on all sides of it.
No, of course.
But especially again,
Yeah.
if you're making the investment.
As a consumer, it's a very
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. I completely agree with you.
Thank
And I don't think I really gave you an answer,
No,
but,
yeah.
but you asked.
Because we don't know.
You just asked.
Yeah.
And then with the answers that you're given, you decide what your comfort level is with the answer that you've been given
Right.
and go from there.
Because, well, universities are employing the professors anyway, so that's why they can't give refunds, because, you know, all the.
Oh, it's
Like it's a budget.
It's
thing.
very
Right.
involved because
Right.
it's not just the
Yeah.
professors, it's, you know, it's a business.
Yeah,
Colleges and universities, and especially if you're talking tuition driven,
yeah.
you know, it's, you know, so it's not as easy as just one thing. But great question. Yes.
Oh, sorry. I was just wondering if, like, in the case of a student that's like, I know where I want to go, and I guess takes the decision to go early decision.
Yep.
I was just wondering if you could speak on the financial aid aspect of that. I know that, like, obviously we talked about the calculator. I've heard of people talking to financial aid officers before, and then deciding to go early decision, and then being like, this isn't as much money as I thought, and then just being stuck in a situation where you're buying into a school that you can't afford.
Yeah, and that's a great question, and that might, so the question is about, you've applied to a school, early decision, you've been admitted, you know, the financial aid offer is really not doable, and I think that, two things. It would be important if you're applying to a school early decision to have that question answered saying, you know, I really want to be here, but there's a fiscal part of that if we're falling shy here significantly and we can't do it, is that the loophole that says I don't have to go? All right, so there's that. For some families, they may not want to do early decision because they're applying to all schools that student would really like to go to, and it really comes down to the best financial aid offer, which, hey, listen, realistic, very realistic. So if you're really weighing what your best financial offer is, I would encourage you not to do early decision. Because if you're comparing and contrasting, yeah, that's probably not the best option. Yeah.
So like, I think, I don't know, I want to defer to you, but I think over the years what we've heard is that some colleges that do offer early decision, in that offer, they commit to 100% of what's called demonstrated need. Whereas like, Quinnipiac probably does not commit to 100% demonstrated.
Right, right.
I mean, not most colleges don't, but if you were able to get the information from that school that you were considering for early decision, that they meet 100% demonstrated need, then it's a safer opportunity in terms of making that decision to apply early.
Thank you.
But definitely, absolutely, but definitely, that's a great point. Definitely a good thing to ask.
Right.
If you are contemplating applying to a school early decision, ask that question. Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Yes,
My question is with letters of recommendations.
yes,
I understand that you should have your letters of recommendation should come from pretty much your junior and senior year. But is there any like preference in terms of like the subjects that the teachers teach of those recommendations? Should you have like maybe like one STEM, maybe one of the arts? Like, is there any like influence that has?
that's a great question. So the question is, you know, not necessarily what year the recommendor has had the student in class, but is there a particular subject area that schools are looking for? So there are a few thoughts that I have about that. One is it depends on the school, and some schools may also say it depends on the major. You know, if you're applying to a school for an engineering program, they may want something in the sciences and in math, or something to that degree. But not every school is going to give you those kinds of guidelines. The one thing that I do think about, though, is that if you are applying to a college or university and you've got a blemish grade-wise, a poor grade on your transcript, and it doesn't show very well in terms of the grade among the other grades, but you worked really, really hard, they may be exactly the person that you want to get that recommendation from. Because you know what, let's face it, it's easy to look like a superstar when everything is going really well, but sometimes to see what kind of student you really are is to see how you navigated through a class where maybe the grades don't reflect all of the effort and the hard work and problem solving that you put into it. So that would be a consideration as well. But depends on the school, it depends on the college or university, but they will be specific about what they want. You're very welcome. Yes?
Well, I had a question, but then I wanted to just sort of add to what you had just said about, one of the students who needs to be dealing with and have some blemishes on their transcripts, and I'm a little worried about, how to handle that. And I was going to ask about a friend of mine whose son received a conditional acceptance to, I believe it's Norwich University in Vermont, the military college.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Norwich, I'm not sure, but, so his conditional acceptance was that he was accepted as long as he took 2 colleges at 4 seats the first semester, and then transferred in halfway through. So is that common at university schools?
So the question was about conditional acceptances, and a student could enroll at a college or university under the condition that they took so many courses at a regionally accredited community college or college and perhaps achieved a certain grade or better. That can happen. Is every school going to do that? No, but that could happen. Yeah, it's, I think that's one of the beauties of this process is that colleges are looking for ways to work with the students and to really kind of see where they are in the process. And we all come into our own at different points in the process. And I think that, hearing this story, if any of you might be able to identify with that story, that maybe you're on the bubble, and you're not quite sure, to ask an admissions committee if there's, if you don't get in, are there any things that you could do, or if you're looking like a borderline candidate where they're not sure if you'll get in or not, are there any things that they could recommend for you to do to increase your candidacy at that particular college or university? Because one, that is showing demonstrated interest. It's showing that you really are interested in that particular school. So yes, it could happen. Does it happen at all schools? It doesn't happen at all schools, but yeah, that could happen. And the other thing is too, especially, I had mentioned something about interviews. Whether a school has interviews or not, if you feel like there's a story that you need to tell, if you feel comfortable doing it during an interview, great. If you do it during an essay or through an essay, great. Sometimes it may be through having a conversation with an admissions person at a particular college or university telling your story. But I think, sometimes students will send an essay that outlines things that I might add to the student's application materials. But I think that if there are extenuating circumstances and you want to share what your story is so that college admissions folks don't kind of, wonder on their own, geez, I wonder what happened here. It's always better to hear from the student if they're comfortable sharing that. Ask how you can supplement the application to be able to make sure that you're able to get your story across. These are great, I have to say, these are great questions. Thank you.
Talk a little bit about needs blind versus needs aware, and what
so there's some terms out there about the admissions process and whether a student is admitted and the family's ability to pay for the student's education. And so colleges and universities that are need blind, it doesn't mean that they'll meet your need. It just means that whether you can afford to go to that school or not is not factored into whether the student is admitted or not. If a school is need aware, then at some point in the process, the family's or the student's ability to pay for the education could be factored in. Whether that's factored in right from day one of the application process, or whether that's factored in if the student is waitlisted and they're being considered whether they're going to be taken off the wait list. And it doesn't mean that they've been waitlisted because of financial reasons. It could mean that we ran out of spaces, or it could mean that they were a borderline candidate. That could be more the need aware. So I think that, again, on the website, it will talk about need blind or need aware. And if you're not sure, ask. Absolutely ask, because it's not a one-size-fits-all question. It's going to vary. And if they are need aware or need sensitive, you want to know at what point that comes in and what does that actually mean. Yes?
How different is the application process when applying as a transfer student from another school?
That's a good question. So how different is the application process for transfers versus incoming first-year students coming out of high school? Again, I'm always going to say it depends, but typically, so there are a couple of things that you would probably want to do. If you are transferring from another college or university, let's say you are at a community college, okay? A lot of the community colleges will have transfer counselors that will work with their student and help advise them as they're looking to transfer to another college or university. So there's that. If there are schools that the student is hoping to transfer into, a lot of schools will have transfer counselors who actually work with students who are coming from other colleges and universities. So there could be a separate application that the student is filling out. There may be a requirement if the student doesn't hold an associate's degree from college, which is typically a 2-year degree. There may be a requirement that the student submit a high school transcript with proof of high school graduation. A lot of schools may say, we'll look at what credits you took at your previous institution to see if they're equivalent to your future school's courses, and if you get a certain grade or better, would that be transferable? And if so, at what point, at what year in your college education would you come in? So, and some schools have articulation agreements. So, for example, and I'm throwing a lot of jargon at you, sorry about that, but if a student goes to a community college and they get an associate's degree, which means that they've finished up their 2 years, there may be other state schools or other private institutions that have articulation agreements with that community college, which means that if a student has successfully completed their associate's degree from that school with a certain grade, that they will automatically accept that student into their program and they will only have 2 more years to go. So that's one of the great things about being a transfer is that if, for whatever reason, you are becoming a transfer student, it's a possibility. And there could be a number of reasons. It could be for financial reasons. It could be because you really don't know at this point what you want to do, or you're concerned about the whole COVID factor and what impact is that going to be. So So at this point, I don't know that I want to do a 4-year school. It could be you want to improve your grades. It could be for a number of reasons. Well, what a great crowd. Thank you.